The last 30 minutes, I hope we will survive that. Everyone is tired. I hope you had a very productive day. And this session will be practical. It will be based on my experience with teaching at Lomonosov Moscow State University and with teenagers. I hope that you will leave this session with some ideas on teaching and some, basically some practical things that you can take away. That was my plan, okay? So, I'm going to talk about fiction today, teaching fiction. So, raise your hand if you've ever used fiction in teaching English. Okay. Yes, that's what I was expecting. So I'm sure that everyone knows that fiction is important, that we should use books and so on and so forth. And I actually, before preparing for the talk, I was thinking that I should ask my colleagues what they think about using fiction. And most people are saying it's good, it's productive, it's interesting, though it's difficult, right? So choosing nice fiction story or novel or something is difficult in terms of topic, in terms of language. Well, many texts are just big. Sometimes they're really big, right? So you don't know how to choose the vocabulary, you don't know how to, apart from doing the discussion in class, very often we don't know what to do with that. So, and most teachers, well, at least half of the teachers I was talking to, they called it challenging. So challenge was one of the most common words that they used to talk about using fiction in teaching. So, and including me, I should say that I try to use fiction with my psychology students, and we try to read some stories, short stories, long stories. It all worked nicely, but at some point I thought that maybe we can maximize our efforts, minimize the time that teachers spend on the preparation, which is always nice, right? And then maximize the productive effects from the lesson. So, and today I'm going to talk about flash fiction. So before I tell you what flash fiction is, can you give me any sort of associations? What comes to your mind when you hear the word flash? Maybe just flash out, without fiction. So any...
Maybe meme format or short format.
Okay, short. What else? Give me just adjectives. What comes to your mind? Bright. Something else? Brief. Come on, flash, like in photography.
Unexpected.
Unexpected. Something else?
Fast.
Fast. Okay. Well, you're all right, because any flash, whatever if we're talking about photography or if we're talking about fiction, so it's quick, right? It's short, of course. It's sudden. Very often it's sudden, and then it's bright. So actually, flash fiction is a separate genre. Have you ever heard about flash fiction?
No.
Good. That's then, well, you will learn something interesting, hopefully. So flash fiction is a separate genre that exists. And interestingly enough, it exists under many different names. And these names you can see on the slide. I'm not going to read all of those. But my favorite would be nanofiction, the last one. I think it's just a very cute and fancy name, nanofiction. Very modern. Then you can call it a postcard fiction. Again, fancy one. So you can call them short fiction, very short fiction, short fiction. So as you can imagine, it's going to be really short, right? Well, judging from the name. So, well, how short is too short, or how short can it be? Any ideas? What would be the size of a flash fiction?
6
words.
Okay. I wasn't expecting that, that answer that straight away. I was expecting, one page, one paragraph, but yes, exactly, you're right. I'm talking about 6 words. Supposedly, the first flash fiction was written by Ernest Hemingway, but actually there are lots of debates whether it's true or not, and you can find lengthy reports and lengthy articles online that will debate whether it was him or not, so I don't know. Looks like it wasn't him, but still many people attribute the appearance of this genre to Hemingway. So this was the first flash fiction, they sometimes even call, flash fiction stories. So, for sale, baby shoes never worn. That's the story that supposedly he created. So, I'm going to tell you how I use flash fiction in the classroom and how I teach with it. Before we move on to that, this story, if we think about emotional level, would it be a happy story or a sad story for you?
Sad story.
Sad. Anyone thinks it's a happy story? No one?
On your view of children, I get it.
Could be. I mean, that's the point. Of course it could be. Most people usually view it as quite negative, right? I don't know if it's a Russian thing to see it negatively or it's something different, but yes, many people would say that it's a sad story. Though, if you have nice imagination, you can pretend it's a very happy story, and let's say the baby just didn't wear the shoes and now we need to sell them, you know, that's simple as it is. As you can imagine, because it's a separate genre, flash fiction exists, well, it has been there, let's call it, on the market for quite a while, and you'll be surprised that actually there are books that are published with flash fiction stories. One of the books is called Not Quite What I Was Planning. You can find it online. You can try to download it. Most often you can buy it, but actually you can try to download it as well. So the name of the book, Not Quite What I Was Planning. These are so-called 6-word memoirs. It's about 300 pages of 6-word stories. So these like thousands and thousands of stories there. Amazing. I mean, they're so different, so various. Originally, this was, because as you see on the cover, it's the Smith magazine, that's an American-based online magazine that originally was, they were interested in finding materials and taking materials from the general audience. So they collected different short stories from people and they made it an online version of the book. It was so popular that then it got published, in paper, which I think is, interesting. And you can find famous people there as authors, and you can find just regular, usual people like us. So these are just some examples by some people, I have no idea who they are. 6-word stories that just, appeal to me in some way. So please read stories on the slide and tell me which ones you might be in some way interested in, which story kind of appeals to you. Segment. I'm a mother and I'm fine. Interesting. Can you say how do you understand it?
I can't put two things together.
So it's so weird for you, so you have no idea.
Well,
Can someone explain this?
Learning to care about yourself, to support yourself like your mother does.
Oh, it's interesting. So learning how to care about yourself, how to treat yourself, right?
Yeah.
So you are like mother of, to yourself, something like this.
You're the child and the mother at the same time.
Okay, any other ideas? I'm my mother and I'm fine.
She's at the age of her mom, and now she understands why she was like that.
Right, so now you maybe you're a mom as well, you're a mother, and then you understand your mother, why she behaved this way. So I'm like my mother and I'm fine, and now I'm fine with that, something like this. Okay, any others that would be interesting? The last one, yes, I hope, that's my favorite. Old white rabbit became black sheep. What associations you have with this?
Alice.
Huh?
Alice in Wonderland.
Okay, but if we try to relate it to real life, Alice in Wonderland, that's good, of course, but that's more about the rabbit, not about the black sheep, right? So, any associations?
Following your dream.
Yeah. Following your dream, but then are you accepted by the society? Well, probably not, because if you are black sheep, you're kind of an outcast or outsider in some way, right? So, these are just examples to illustrate my point, then how you can use them in the classroom. So this is an example on the top. I'm not giving the author because... So, found true love, married someone else. So, now what you can do, you can simply ask questions to your students. Now about the age of students, that really depends. I've tried it with my teenage students, it worked. I tried it with my, first, second, third year students, it worked. I tried it with my master students, so they are adults, it worked nicely as well. If you do it as a speaking exercise, it is good as a warm-up. It is good as a fluency task to encourage some speaking practice, because all phrases are very different. You can find different topics about, different things. There could be something more psychological, something more, I would say, like family issues. So if you really read through, you can find things that might appeal to your students and your topic. So what can we do with this one? Let's imagine we want to do sort of speaking, discussion, warm-up or fluency exercise. I don't know, that depends on the stage of the lesson, of course. So, found true love, married someone else. So is it a happy story or a sad story? It's a happy story for someone. It could be both. Most people would immediately say it could be both. Okay, then explain why both. And then usually what happens, people are at the beginning, they're puzzled. They don't know what to say. It's like, I don't know, maybe happy, maybe sad. I'm giving these questions, maybe they're not that good. You can think of better questions. But with questions, you're kind of pushing your students to think deeper. Because if you simply ask, what do you think about this story? Well, it's a good story, thank you very much. That's the discussion, right? So you need to make them think deeper and more. So what do you think? Is it a story about a man or a woman? A man. Interesting.
Woman?
Interesting. Probably, mostly female audience, right? It's a story about a man. Okay. How old is he then? 35. So middle-aged man. In middle-aged crisis, supposedly. How is this person feeling right now?
In a crisis.
In a crisis? Well, can you name some emotions? Regret, lost. I do not hear everyone, but yeah. So
Desperate.
desperate, maybe desperate to find true love or something. I don't know. So maybe at this stage you can repeat emotions, adjectives for emotions. For example, just an idea, right? Van, how do you feel about this person? Sympathetic. Okay, as a variant. Maybe you don't feel anything, and it's also fine, right? You think, okay, I don't care much. Well, just a man, had some wrong decisions in life. That's his fault. What can we do? So it could be this way. Do you think is there any hope for this person for
No.
happy future? No. No hope. So that's a very, then let's say, black story, very sad story, right? Okay, so you can find any short story. Think of questions appropriate for your students', I don't know, age, interests. You can kind of think of a story beforehand, like the background. And with your questions, you can try to initiate and try to lead them into that. If we talk about adults, well, they have imagination and they can figure out themselves. With teenagers, maybe you need to lead them into that a little bit more. So one exercise you can do is do speaking in different ways with questions. Then they can ask questions to each other, pair work, group work, right? Another idea. Taking a lifetime to grow up. That's another flash fiction or short story. Here what you can do, you can choose pictures that you think might be appropriate to illustrate the story. And then you can ask students to discuss in groups which picture is the most appropriate and why. This is more of a, a little bit of psychological approach, more intuitive, and then they need to give reasons why this is this way. So which picture you think appeals to you better? Which picture would you choose?
With the shoes?
Huh?
With shoes?
With shoes. Okay. Is it a happy or sad story?
Happy.
Happy, maybe. Okay. Because for me, the shoes picture is quite sad, and I would not, for example.
Because of colors.
Because of colors, I don't know. For me, it's emotionally charged negatively. Okay. Anyone else? Like, what picture would you choose? Okay. Light bulbs. Again, I'm not asking to do it now. We don't have much time. But with your students, you can provide many pictures, and you can ask them to explain why this picture illustrates the story. Another way is you ask them to draw a picture that will illustrate the story, right? And then, let's say, when they have a picture, they can present it to the rest of the group, explaining how they view the story. So that's another idea. Well, what we can do if we talk about speaking, so this is kind of a summary here. With speaking, we can practice functional language using short stories or flash fiction. So you can practice this agreeing, disagreeing, you can practice expressing opinion or any other functional language you can think of, and then this flash fiction will serve, let's say, will serve the function of a prompt. We often find prompts, some phrases, contradictory phrases. This is just maybe an easy way, right? And 5 minutes left.
Including 5 minutes for questions.
Okay. So then we can do group discussions, as I said, fluency I mentioned, and they can practice monologues or dialogues, right? So if they prepare one story and they, explain it, or they discuss it as a more dialogue variant. Of course, you can use it for writing. So the easiest way would be writing your own 6-word story. It's actually very challenging, I should say. If you imagine you write this 6-word story, it's very challenging, but interesting task. Also, you can use it as a prompt for writing further essay, composition, opinion essay, whatever, compare, contrast essay, I don't know, whatever you can think of. And again, you use it as a prompt. You can use it as a prompt for collaborative writing when several students write an essay, for example, together. First they discuss, so speaking that will lead, smoothly into writing, which I think, makes sense. Another thing what you can do, you can practice vocabulary. So these are phrases that were actually created by my psychology students. And these are the vocabulary items that we covered. So we had flesh and blood as a vocabulary unit that we studied. It runs in the family, lifespan and offspring. Can you guess what topic we studied?
Family?
Yeah, kind of. It was family relations. It was in the course of educational psychology and developmental psychology because I work with psychology students. But as you see, it's very possible to practice vocabularies as well. Sometimes they really, they get at the essence here. So I like some of them very much. Then, just to sum it up, why I recommend using 6-word stories. I would say that, first of all, it boosts creativity. It stimulates creativity a lot, okay? And in terms of speaking, in terms of writing, yes, it usually starts slowly. But then when they understand how to deal with that, it kind of, becomes better. Because it's all about speculation and fantasy, and they cannot ask the author, what did he mean? You cannot find reviews online explaining everything about the novel or the story. They need to deduce it, and that's actually good. Then it's very short. Short to look at it, it's good to find it. I mean, you can, when you prepare for the lesson, you save a lot of time, honestly, because it's a good prompt that you can use in many, many ways, and reading it takes so little time. Then, it's very good because it has very low grammar complexity, so very limited grammar constructions. It means that it will work at lower levels. Then, well, as for writing, it's a good prompt and it eliminates fears. I mean, it lowers the anxiety for writing. As for vocabulary, I mentioned it. As a psychology student, with psychology students, we do this, empathy thing and exercises to sort of sympathize with the character, or what do you feel? We work a lot with feelings, and I think that's important. And there is the whole area of emotional intelligence, and dealing with emotional intelligence in the classroom, that helps this way a lot. And finally, it's just fun, and yes, it's challenging and it's unusual, especially when you bring it for the first time. They're like, oh, what's that? Oh, fun, okay, let's do that. So they like it. And well, I think basically that's everything I wanted to say. Thank you very much. That's my email. If you want to get the presentation, I can send it to you. Just email me. I can share it. And if you have any questions or ideas, or if you want to share your experience of using flash fiction later on in your classroom, I would be happy to know how it went. Okay?
Thank you very much, Katya. Do you have any questions?
Very briefly, how do you find good pictures for the topics?
I don't know if they're good, that's the question. I don't know, I just, first I try to, well, I just put keywords simply. So if it was about life, I don't remember what was the lifetime. So I put, Google Pics, just lifetime, and I look through, and then intuitively, more or less, that appeals to me, that appeals to me. But I try to make them different on different spectrums. Something more, I don't know, graphic, something more colorful or black and white-ish. So just different. Sometimes. It doesn't work every time, honestly, of course, because sometimes they look at pictures and they have no associations, like, I don't know. But what I do, I usually prepare several cards for the lesson, so I have several phrases. If one phrase, one flash fiction doesn't work, you can give another one. And I really have piles of them, so kind of, you cannot predict the reaction, that's the point. It's good and it's bad at the same time. But because it's so short, it's easy to have lots of them at hand.
Thank you.
Any more questions?
Those stories that are short, they have a lot of elliptical constructions. Yeah? Do you think it's not a good model for the students? Is it dangerous to use them quite often?
That's a very good question, thank you. I was thinking whether to talk about elliptical grammatical construction or not, but if you look through many phrases of many short fiction stories, you will see that they do not follow grammatical rules, because sometimes you will include auxiliary verb, another time you would omit it, and it depends only on the length, because here the content comes first and the rule of 6 words comes first. So it doesn't follow any rule, then you cannot say, okay, let's look at the grammar and analyze it. It's not consistent within, throughout the whole.
I'm just talking about genre learners, yeah? You are teaching short stories,
Yeah.
but then you ask them to produce a discursive essay, and it serves a model. That's what I'm saying. It might be quite challenging, for the students to follow that model and produce something different, which should be written in a more accurate way.
I think this model, that's not a model in terms of writing, because it's not a model, it's so short. It's more like it boosts the ideas. It's something that stimulates it more on the content level rather than linguistic level. And then especially, I would say that this is the main thing. Of course, it's not model for any essay or something, because it's not an essay, right? It's 6 words. But it's something new. Like, there is an Instagram page which gives you writing prompts. There are thousands of writing prompts that you can find on the internet, right? This is also just a prompt. New York Times, the New York Times, they have lots of writing prompts that you can find online. Why not this one? So I'm not saying it's a model as a model. It's more like it kind of boosts inspirational something. It makes them think. It makes them puzzled. So it kind of brings them out of the comfort zone, I would say. Sometimes they just, I don't know, think, brainstorm, and then you can figure out.
Any more questions?
Okay, so how many times have you actually used this? Like a couple or many?
I would say about 10 times.
So what would you, what advice would you give to a teacher who's going to try this for the first time? Like, what did it go smoothly every time, or did something not work?
First, you should decide what aim you need, like what actually you need to get from that. The first time I tried it, I just worked with my master students, psychology master students. They are A1 level, unfortunately. So they're very low level, but I wanted them to speak, to at least say something. So I had lots of prompts like this, And that was a speaking exercise when they had, let's say, 3 minutes in a group, they discussed one card, and then they sort of rotated and they exchanged cards. And then they were speaking, trying to express what they feel, what the story could be. That was the first time I tried it. Then I tried it with my teenage students as a prompt for writing short essays. It wasn't like exam format, so it was shorter than at the exam. But they are PET students, so B1 level, and it was like an opinion essay. It was nice, worked well. And as I said, you cannot predict the reaction, so it might go not wrong, but you might not get any effect from the very beginning. But I would suggest bringing several flash fictions for one lesson. Don't come with one phrase, because if it doesn't work, if they don't have any associations, then what would you do? So start with several, and actually first read through them, and if you have nothing to say on then your students might not have any ideas as well. So start with yourself, think, how do I feel about this? What does that mean to me? If your students ask you, what does that mean? What would you say? How would you explain? So that would be probably my recommendation where to start from.
Maybe one last question? No?
I just like holding the microphone. So how did you come up with this idea?
Honestly, I don't remember. It just happened that I was looking through, I don't know, it just, I came across this flash fiction. I was curious what that means. I don't remember where. I just got, I saw this genre of flash fiction, and I had, like, as most here in the room, you've never heard of it, and I've never heard of it before, so I thought, okay, let me find out. And then I realized that there is this book of 300 pages of 6-word stories. That's impressive, right? And like I was reading it for half an hour, and I thought, oh wow, that's interesting, because I had lots of associations. And there are quite many psychological topics, that's why I like it for my psychology students. But you can find things on family, on, let's say, education, on growing up, and then you can actually build it into your topic that you're studying. It shouldn't be out of the context, it should be within, and it goes smoothly. Well, just choose the ones you like. Actually, this book is one of the 3. There are 3 now books of 6-word memoirs, and this was the first one. Now there are 3 of them. I mean, that's enough for till the rest of our lives, teaching careers.
Every lesson.
Yeah, for every lesson ever that you teach, you can find a new one.
Thank you very much, Ekaterina. We would like to